wants to see them. So the space needs for Merit, a fairly small but a little larger than the previous college's space need. About 44,000 ASF is the net need. The situation over at Merit is that the classroom category is slightly overbuilt. And those spaces will certainly need to be looked at for potential reconfiguration and remodel. Again, partnerships are going to be key. Merit has a beautiful 38-acre parcel of land, and there's been many wonderful ideas floated for how to use it, student housing or other projects. And our recommendation is that the college and the district look at partnerships where bringing in someone who knows and is expert at doing and even financing these projects might provide some good revenue for the district and the college. Enhancing student support services, facilities, which is going to be talked about by the architects, and again, to continue focusing on their program of distinction here, which is the health and wellness, the programs. Moving on to Laney. Going to walk through this. 1.5% growth rate, little lower, a little lower growth rate, but obviously a larger institution already. We see the student head count going to a little over 15,000 out to the future.
What's the rationale for Laney having a lower growth rate than the other three colleges, when proximity, where the transportation is, and all the reasons why we're the largest? What is the thinking behind that? How do you rationalize that lower growth rate?
Yeah, the question, I don't know if everybody heard it, was that why Laney would have a smaller growth rate than the other colleges, being close to transportation, which is definitely true. I know the McIntyre report went into it a little, and we looked at the data as well. There's so much overlap between the districts, obviously. The population growth varies only slightly. I think it was driven in part by the geography of the campus and the facilities, but I think it's also a desire and a strategy of seeing the other campuses potentially take on more of the student demand. Obviously, students can go to whichever campus they want.
That's news to me.
But this was we can talk about that, Frank, but that was, yeah. I think it was primarily driven by the specific demographics of that 5-mile ring that's in the report. But we can look at that after.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So again, the section level analysis was done, and the space needs analyzed. Laney College shows a need for about 23,000 ASF in space. There's a situation at Laney where the lab space is showing to be overbuilt fairly substantially, about 23,000 feet. We looked at that, and we looked at some of the space, the uses of the space, and how it could be reconfigured to be more efficient and be more effective. There are some very large lab spaces at all the colleges, but the CTE program spaces are considered lab, and that's one of the reasons for the large spaces. The culinary program, the welding, many of HVAC, all those kinds of programs at all the colleges are categorized as laboratory space. So the recommendations for Laney included, again, partnerships, and specifically the potential of doing something with BART is very exciting. Looking at 7th Street, looking at potentially closing 7th Street. I know there's also a proposal to narrow 7th Street. Could be a very, very positive thing for the college. Going to move on and talk about the district and district-wide recommendations that came out of our plan. The first one, I'm going to repeat, is a commitment to the plan, is to really, we encourage you to really utilize the plan, and it is a dynamic plan. It is something that is not etched in stone. There are going to be a lot of processes that come from these plans that are just going to begin tomorrow morning and just start. However, the plan identifies that chain of dependencies and effects that are so important to keep in mind, and we hope that will be a guide for you in the future. TCO, again, the total cost of ownership, when you're looking at new facilities, to really keep that in mind, and ultimately to look at future funding and identify where the funding will come from to achieve these facilities plans of the future. I want to point out at the bottom here, our website, I did hear from Roxanne that the plans are all available on the district's website as well, but they're also available on our website at mosco.com. So with that, I'd like to invite the board to ask any questions they have. And yeah.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate your opening up for questions. I'd like to break it up into segments. The board hasn't quite gone to sleep up here. I have a couple questions, and then I'd like to open it up to the rest of the board members. When you, your 45,000 figure that you're looking for 20, what is that? We throw out a lot of numbers in terms of students and whatever. Is that FTES?
No, that is duplicated head count. So in other words, it's really valuable to look at each college individually. 10,000 students attending.
Now, what, because to me that's a meaningless figure. What is the FTES that we're looking at in 2022?
Yeah, you want to address that, Mike? Yeah, I'm going to go back to the WISH.
Let's go back to that. Of course, the conversion between headcount and FTES depends upon the number of units or coursework that a typical student takes. Currently, at this time, in this district, your students are taking just under 10 units, about 9.6, 9.7 units. So if you were to convert that, you could take about 2/3 of the 45,000 would be your FTES.
So we're looking at about a 30% growth in 14 years.
That's correct.
30% in 14 years, okay. That's lower than I would have guessed. And you're looking at a projection of what history repeating itself and what you think the state will fund, because funded growth is a meaningful number. Unfunded growth is, you can't carry forever.
You're absolutely right. And that's why, I think you just answered your previous concern. We don't see, at least for the next, significantly from now until 2012, 2013, in that range, the state really funding much at all. And that suppresses your ability to meet the need of this community.
Right, okay.
And so there is a suppression factor in here. And that's why, if you were to have the funding, I think you could grow significantly larger than what we've listed.
Okay. Yeah, and I kind of wanted to make that a matter of record, and that's one of the reasons I asked the question. I think there's not a lot of understanding in the public, and I don't think there's a whole lot of understanding throughout our stakeholders at the Peralta colleges. Trustee Ewan?
Thank you. I had very similar questions, and so what I would like to see when this plan gets sort of polished and finalized in its final form is, in fact, a translation of headcount into FTES. And then what I'd also like to understand is what are the calculations behind these growth figures? You've said that we're not going to get funded for all of this, and I don't think anybody thinks we're going to get funded for all of this. So what I'm trying to understand is when we actually do facilities planning and we look out at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, if the state, for example, is only going to fund 1.5% growth or something like that, we project 3% demand. Well, we're not going to grow 3% because we won't be able to afford it. So our actual facilities needs in 5 years will be what it is that we actually can pay for. So, you know, I think Frank asked an important question. What are the calculations that are going into, what are the formulas that are going into our projected growth rates in any given area? And what I'm hearing you say is, oh, we sort of cut it in the middle. We expect that actual demand will be higher than 3%. That I can't remember. Maybe you said 3%. That the state, who knows what they're gonna fund next year? They're at this point talking about funding 2%, but